Welcome back, Truth Seeker. Yesterday, December 28th, 2023, a Thursday, we got the headline that Donald Trump was going to be reinstated on the Colorado ballot 9 days after he was removed. And then later that same day, the headline broke that he had been removed from the Maine ballot by the Secretary of State. And before we get into this, I want to go over the thumbnail in case you were confused by it. Of course, in the top left corner, we have the Secretary of State of Maine and Donald Trump. In the next thumbnail, in case you forgot, this was the image put out of the Maine mass shooter, Robert Card. Down below, I'm sure you can recognize that's John F. Kennedy, the date of his fateful assassination, November 22nd, 1963. And we'll get to how all these things come together. And then finally, we have a scene from V for Vendetta, where the motto from the film was remember the 5th of November, which of course is the election date coming up in 2024. And if you've never seen V for Vendetta, has a lot to do with history, has a lot to do with politics, has a lot to do with terrorism, has a lot to do with this time period that we're now living in the world, where the world had fallen after wars on terrorism and a war on germs. And of course, November 5th is a very special day to the Jesuits in history. And in the film, the protagonist wears the Guy Fawkes mask. A lot of people overlook that, but Guy Fawkes, the Jesuit from history who tried to blow up British Parliament in a political assassination. So here's how these elements are going to come together. We're going to talk about how this ruling against Trump, him being removed from the ballot, came on the 1122nd day of the Secretary of State being in her position, which happened in December of 2020. She took office on the 2nd of December 2020. So 1,122 days into her term, 1122, like the JFK assassination anniversary. Last year, you had the killings on King's Road, the news on the King's birthday at 1122 as well. But anyhow, 1122nd day of her age. We're going to get to how her name, Gematria, equates to 63. We're going to get to how her story broke 63 days after the news story was released of the name of the mass shooter in Maine, who was said to be an expert military marksman. Hello, Lee Harvey Oswald. Her middle name's also Lee. But, and of course, Lee has to do with the Civil War, which goes with January 6th, and what Nikki Haley just did down in South Carolina, when that's where, Civil War history. But anyway, from Robert Card being named as the shooter to this ritual yesterday was 63 days later. Of course, JFK was killed in 63 on 11/22. And then we'll also just talk about the Jesuits and the fingerprints all over Donald Trump, who, of course, is Jesuit educated, JFK's demise, and again, the election day that syncs up with V for Vendetta, a film that's set at this moment in history that we're now living around the 2020s, where, again, the world has fallen to wars on terrorism, wars on germs. So let's not forget who was president when the war on germs unfolded back in 2020. But yeah, let's go through all of this one more time. So on the same day that Maine boots Trump from the ballot, he's reinstated in Colorado. And if you're new here, Gematria, very simple practice of coding numbers into words. ABC is 1, 2, 3 is the most simple cipher. There are 4 ciphers of the English language that are all based on the alphabetic order. With the alphabetic order, you can see that election and Colorado both equate to 83. These news stories, December 28th, 2023, fell on a date with 83 numerology. 12 plus 28 plus 20 plus 23, 83. And as we'll get to, 83 is the 23rd prime number, and Maine's the 23rd state. And this comes at the end of 2023. But with the alphabetic order and numerology, again, election in Colorado are 38. Colorado is also the 38th state, and that's a big number in the nation's capital on the 38th parallel. Again, election in Colorado in reverse are both 133. The words president, White House, and government also equate to 133. You can go back and watch the first debate that Trump was in 2015 when he was first running for office on the stage full of Republicans. I think it was like 20 candidates. But the first time Trump speaks, that debate was hosted on Fox News. The very first time he speaks, if you want to go back and watch it, you'll see that they put up the stat on the screen. According to Forbes, Trump is the 133rd richest man in the world. 133. And from knowing Gematria back then, we said that day, we said, are they telling us that he's the next selection? And sure enough, he was. And with the reverse alphabetic order and numerology, election in Colorado are 43, like Masonic, like DC's the Masonic city, like the letters D and C are 4 and 3. So, I know we covered that yesterday, but just making sure it's sticking. The 83 is crucial because, again, 83, the 23rd prime number. Massachusetts, the 23rd state. Donald, 23, right? Notice how Maine also has the Gematria 24, and the coverage this morning is, the Supreme Court's going to have to do something about this. Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision. This is going to have implications. People aren't going to know who to vote for. Can they choose the guy who can't be on the ballot in all the states? Again, a state like Maine's probably not going to be won by a Republican anyhow, but the ritual is clear. Maine 24, like the election year, 2024. And for another familiar pattern, this woman, Shenna Lee Bellows, who's the Secretary of State who removed him from the ballot, her birthday is March 23rd, 1975. So from her birthday, March 23rd, to December 28th, and by the way, next year in the leap year, her birthday will be the 83rd day of the year. And a leap year, March 23rd, is the 83rd day. But from her birthday to this decision, December 28th, was 281 days, the 281st day of her age, which is the 60th prime number. And again, we've been talking about the patterns with Trump and 60 and ritual this whole time because the upcoming election is the 60th U.S. presidential election. And that number has been fateful in election history. JFK, selected in 1960, assassinated. 100 years before that, Lincoln, selected in 1860, assassinated. The Masonic Southern Jurisdiction headquarters set up in Charleston where the Civil War began, it was set up in 1801, 60 years before 1861 when the Civil War began. 60 is a number with a fateful history. The word order also has gematria of 60. And what rules over us, what makes the order of this world as we know it, it's a death cult. And that's that Jesuit Masonic cabal. But anyhow, Donald Trump and 60. If you're new here, we've been talking nonstop about Donald Trump and 60 rituals. It got real obvious last year, July 14th, 2022, exactly 60 weeks into the first ever Jesuit Ignatian year, which ran more than a typical calendar year. Exactly 60 weeks into the first Jesuit Ignatian year, you got 3 stories about Trump that day. The first was he hinted he was going to run for the 60th presidential election. The second was conservatives against Trump came out with 60 legal cases for why he should not be chosen. And then the third story that day was that his ex-wife fell down the stairs and died. And like we said that day, it was very obvious that was all about the upcoming 60th presidential election. So now here we are with another ritual just before 2024 gets underway. Of course, in Gematria, Donald Trump does equal 60. And notice how Shenna Bellows, she's the 50th Secretary of State for the state of Maine. Shenna Bellows equals 50. She went to Middlebury College. It's funny, out of my former friends, the people who I used to be close to before 2013 when I learned this knowledge and pretty much everyone abandoned me and started calling me names, the 2 biggest haters in my friend group, one went to Middlebury and the other went to Berkeley. But Middlebury, pretty prestigious school, long history. Bill Belichick's alma mater, just name one that most Americans would recognize. But anyhow, isn't it funny that she went to Middlebury and Her name's Shenna Bellows, and she becomes the 50th Maine Secretary of State. And again, you look all over the nation, you just see this is going on all over the place. People with the right names for the right positions. It's just like the 56th Speaker of House, his name equals 56, on and on and on. The guy who was the 55th Speaker of House from the LA area celebrated his 55th birthday the day Kobe Bryant died in a huge ritual. Anyway, 50 is a special number if you're new here. Of course, America equals 50 to go with the 50 states and several territories. The name Donald the Big Way is also 50. So she's the latest obstacle for Donald in the upcoming American election. And her full name, as we'll get to, Shenna Lee Bellows, has the 63, like Lee Harvey Oswald in 63, a marksman. So just so you can see, from the day she took office, December 2nd, 2020, from that day to yesterday, the day of the removal of Trump, 1,122 days, right? 1,122 days. JFK on 11/22 and 63. Shenna Lee Bellows, 63. The shooting in Maine was October 25th, but they didn't put out the name of the shooter until the next day, October 26th, and they said he was a skilled marksman from the military. Again, reminiscent of Lee Harvey Oswald, from October 26th to this ritual 63 days later. And the lesser date numerology also for 12/28/23. We talked about how it was a date with the 83 numerology, which is true. The lesser date numerology is just where you skip the 20 parts, 12 plus 28 plus 23, which is 63. So that also fit. And then furthering that Kennedy parallel, and the shooter's name being Robert Card, Trump cards, Donald Trump, tarot, 78 cards in the tarot deck. Donald Trump going to turn 78 June 14th, 2024. Notice how the name Kennedy is 78, and so is the name Cleveland. And once again, Trump had his 2016 convention in Cleveland. A lot of articles have been written about the parallels between Donald Trump and Cleveland, from being obese to having brides from the same part of the world. But Donald Trump also trying to repeat history. Grover Cleveland, the only split-term president in U.S. history. Donald Trump, if he wins election in 2024, will become the second president to do so. So Kennedy, Cleveland, 78. Again, Trump, 78. You got a Kennedy running in this election. Robert Kennedy Jr., who got into the election in a big old Jesuit ritual, as we've covered. And for the record, the word Jesuit equals 78. So does Scottish Rite. Again, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in D.C., the Scottish Rite rites written by Jesuit priests. So 78, special number. R.I.P. to John Thompson, the first black head coach to win a college basketball championship for Jesuit Georgetown. Died unexpectedly while vacationing at age 78. Then they renamed the court after him at Georgetown 666 days later. It's a whole nother story. But anyway. Yeah, just to go back to the day they named Robert Card as the shooter. Again, it was one day later, October 26th. They said the suspect in the Maine mass shooting started making statements about hearing voices and wanting to hurt fellow soldiers while serving at a military base this summer, and spent a few weeks in a hospital, law enforcement officials told CNN. But a relative of the suspect and two former colleagues in the Army Reserve told CNN they weren't aware of him having any long-standing history of mental health issues, although one former colleague remembered him as a skilled marksman and outdoorsman who was among the best shooters in his unit. And recall where they said they found his body. They said he was found dead behind a pharmacy, right? Just like tying in the parallel with mental health and mass shootings. But I also just want to point out that Robert Card and Shenna Bellows both have the same gematria, forwards and backwards, 50 and 67, in light of the way these stories come together. And I do realize that I forgot to plug in the one screenshot, so let's just do it live right now. Whoops, wrong thing. We'll do it like that. So October 26th. Again, the shooting was on the 25th, but he was not named as the shooter until the next day. So October 26th, 2023 to December 28th is 63 days later. And again, this is what the world is that we live in. It's essentially like the Riddler from the Joker, who gives us the news headlines every day that are little clues and made up stories and just foretelling of the next planned event, the next planned ritual to keep the people fighting and divided and arguing and focusing everything but on the ball. And again, the ball for every American should be that you went to 13 years of slave school and you learned about how the nation, there was this revolution to get free from tyrants who just wanted to tax everybody and enslave everybody and live off their wealth and their labor. Like, that's the story, right? That's the story of the nation. Overtaxation, slavery, the things we needed to get away from. But where are we now? Aren't we overtaxed? I mean, is there anything you can think of where you're not taxed? I mean, I can't think of anything where I'm not taxed. Like, every single thing I do there's a tax on it. I thought one of the big things for the founders is they wanted to get away from income tax. They didn't want your labor to be paying, you could be taxed on things you're spending on. But we're just taxed up the wazoo. It's out of control. And, I mean, the other thing is, like, history's past. They didn't want you to have to live in a communist nation where pretty much all your actions and ideas are controlled and your wealth has to be taken so it can be distributed by the authorities. I mean, doesn't that sound a lot more like the nation you live in right now? I mean, we all learned that communism was this terrible, terrible thing, but isn't that pretty much the nation we live in right now? I mean, I don't know what's democratic about this nation. What, the fake elections? These puppets they give us? Well, you get them and then you have no control over the things they do once they're in office? Okay, they're in office. You chose the puppet. Okay, now what? You get to choose any of the things they do while they're in office? They give you a few things on the ballot every year that you do get a vote on. Like out here in Washington State, we get a vote on the upcoming election if we want income tax also in the state. I mean, if that passes, you just got to go like seriously, who's voted for more taxes? Oh, you wanted to be taxed on your income in the state now too. Some states already have income tax, but right now out here in Washington State, we got a million kind of taxes, but we don't have an additional income tax on the state level. Of course, we do have to pay it on the federal level. So, but yeah, this is what it is day after day. And for people who think that this is just cherry picking and just like trying to tie things together, sorry, your head's up your butt. You don't see what nation you're living in. You don't see the mockery that's being made of you every single day. And just like I told you, February 2016, I said why they'd stick Trump in there and why he'd be the perfect polarizing candidate to just divide the people of this nation further and further apart, because that is the agenda. How many different ways can we divide the people? And in the last decade, we've seen a lot of new things. 10 years ago, no one was arguing about should men be able to compete against the ladies in sports. And now we live in an age where I could actually get in trouble for that statement. Someone's like, well, they're not men. They identify as women, so you need to call them women or you're being rude. You're misgendering them. Okay. Yeah, whatever. But, and again, you learn the code. You see how all this has come about by the code, by the cabal. So, yeah, and if you missed the work on the Maine shooting, they had to show you that it was in a bowling alley. Remember, it all started in the bowling alley. Yeah, let me show you something about because when I say mass shootings and bowling, does it trigger anything from your mind from about 20 years ago, like Columbine, and then a big movie that was made by a big round man from Flint, Michigan? Here, I'll just show you what a big joke this was too. So Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine. Michael Moore, who, back in 2000 when Nader was running, he said he would never, ever support one of the major political parties again. And by 2004, he was back behind the Democrats. Like, oh, okay. Well, that pledge lasted a whole 4 years. Anyhow, Notice the overlap with Michael Moore, Lewiston in the Central Intelligence Agency. Notice Bowling for Columbine has gematria of 298. From the day of the Columbine shooting, where they said the shooters went to a bowling alley before they shot up everybody. And by the way, I think the video is still online. You can watch the surveillance of the shooting. And obviously, the authorities knew that nobody was going to watch it, because if you do watch it, you'll notice not only were the mass shooters walking around, so were the seemingly government people in khakis and white shirts with clipboards. So it's like, that's weird. How come the shooters didn't shoot any of those guys? Were they like the MK Ultra mass shooter handlers? Like, who are these guys on the surveillance film just walking around so calmly while the shooting's going on with their white collared shirts and their khakis? But it's 1,279 weeks from Columbine to the bowling alley shooting in Maine. 1,279 is the 207th prime. Michael Moore is 207. 207 is the Maine area code. And again, Bowling for Columbine 298, going with the shooting being on the 298th day of the year, October 25th. So that's why you got to understand there's a thin line between Hollywood. I mean, look, how many more politicians and presidents do we need from Hollywood before people get it? From Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump to the governor. I mean, isn't that a joke to you that Arnold Schwarzenegger, who can barely speak the English language, what did he say during 2020? And he said, "Screw your liberties." I can't imitate his accent, but the Austrian, like Hitler, like we're World War I. The source of it came out of Franz Ferdinand. But yeah, just in gematria, the overlap with shooting and bowling and Wednesday, because the Wednesdays come up so often in the shooting rituals. R.I.P. to Gaston Glock on a Wednesday, as we just covered. So, again, if you're new here, check out the song Gematria, the Killing Name. Gematria is the practice of coding numbers into words. Check out the song Murder by Numbers by The Police. And maybe check out my books, a few more of my videos, and get enlightened about the Cabal Code. Because you learn this code, you'll really start to see what's going on in this world. And if you wonder why, like, more people in the truth community don't talk about this knowledge, it's because they're not really in the truth community. They're in the ad revenue community. They're in the t-shirt selling community. They're in the what's trending community. They're in the, shill community. That's why they don't really lead you anywhere, give you any hard knowledge that you can use day in and day out to see through the cabal, like we do on this channel. And I'm sure part of the reason a lot of them don't cover it too is because they've watched my struggles with keeping my channel afloat and the endless deletions. Again, this channel's not called GematriaEffectNews 25 because I like the number 25. It's been deleted that many times plus more. So yeah, I think that paints the picture. We'll leave it there for now. We'll keep this one short and sweet. Again, thank you to everyone who hits the like and the share. And until next time, Truth Seeker.